Hi guys, I'm Michelle Carpenter, and I have a wonderful guest on Keeping It Real today. I feel so honored and privileged. I feel like she's like a professional of note, and I'm very grateful that Lindsey Scharmyn is here today with me. Lindsey has her own beautiful podcast called Rogue Ways, and is just a wonderful woman. So this is a little bit about Lindsey, but she is so, for me, multidimensional and has so much to offer. And as we were connecting before I pushed record, I was asking how to say her surname, which is spelled Scharmyn, and we say shaman, which just describes so much of who you are, Lindsey. So, welcome to Keeping It Real, and thank you for being here today. And this is a little bit about Lindsey. Lindsey Scharmyn is a shamanic healer and teacher who recovered from severe childhood trauma in order to bring transformative teaching and healing first to students in public schools and now to students of all ages and to fans of her shows, Rogue Ways and Middle Path. Lindsey offers spiritual services, healing, blessings, courses, and orgone and crystal jewelry to empower people to uplift and heal themselves. She's an author of 6 books and counting, a master and board certified teacher, a show host, a spiritual guide, and an experiencer of other realms and states of consciousness who aims to continue uplifting all of herself in order to uplift all of the world. I mean, gosh, I feel like that's the show.
Yeah.
How are you today, Lindsey?
Oh, I'm so good. I'm so glad to be here with you, Michelle. And I feel the same about you. You're a very high level, high vibing, professional who brings healing to people. And so I'm very grateful to be here with you. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as I was wishing you happy Thanksgiving, because I know it was yesterday in the States, and I hope you all had the most blessed, beautiful time together. So let's start with the spiritual healing. Tell me more about that, and let's just see where we go.
Yeah, I'm really amazed to find myself here. I definitely did not see that for myself for
Okay.
much of my life. And I always just feel and see that I was sort of guided to this work. And I don't think I could have avoided it if I tried, and I actually come from this very skeptical background and a very materialist and atheist sort of background. And I also have some spiritual and some religious background from when I was, really young. We were not necessarily raised Christian, but it was in our sort of cultural milieu. We celebrated Christmas and we went to church sometimes, and it was sort of like an afterthought for my family. It wasn't really like the main thing. So we didn't really talk about it, and there wasn't a lot of emphasis on it, but it's there,
Hmm.
but otherwise we really did have this sort of atheist materialist. That was a much stronger trend in my family, and I sort of took that on. And I have a very logical mind. I have a very skeptical mind. So when I looked at any of crystals and healing and psychics, I was like, yeah, right. Like I see the trickery and I see the
Yeah.
frauds, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of frauds.
Yes.
There are people who are just out there trying to, I guess, make money off it and lie to people and
Hmm.
scam people. And so I saw all of that and I just rejected it. I was in rejection of it. But my experiences, which is true gnosis, right? To actually know something is to experience it
I
yourself.
love that. I've never heard that before. True gnosis. I've heard
Yeah.
all knowing, but true gnosis. Wow, I get goosebumps as you say that.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I think that's the goal, for all of us, is to experience ourselves as souls, and to experience the world as spiritual beings in a physical dimension. And then that's how we really truly get to knowing and having what you could call faith, right? And I have now what I would describe as an unshakable faith because of my experiences. No one could have given me that. No one. I could have read all the books and I could have had all the teachers and I could have
Hmm.
had everybody telling me anything they wanted to, but nothing would have actually gotten me to this place of absolute faith except my experiences and
Yes.
really knowing through those, right? So people talk about gnosis a lot as a religion or as a dogma, and
Okay.
that's not what it was when it started. Just like any
Hmm.
religion was not the religion when it started, right? It was certain healers, certain philosophers, and certain people exploring and, oh, here's a good way of looking at the world, and here's a good way of describing this spiritual side of things. And eventually it gets like codified and turned into a religion. And the Gnosticism is no different. And at the core of Gnosticism is exactly this. It's this true gnosis by actually experiencing this for
Yes.
yourself.
Yes.
So I definitely was thrown into that through my experiences, which I didn't ask for, were very often terrifying, were very often super unsettling, and disrupting just
Is this your
towards my
childhood
life.
trauma that you're talking about?
No.
Oh,
No,
just
these are
like
just my
the
spiritual
spiritual. Ah,
experiences.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And often very sort of dark, so very bright and light
Ah,
too, but
yeah,
there I really have seen and experienced both.
yeah.
Uh and those things have led me towards becoming a healer myself. A lot of my experience also was with random shamans and teachers around the world who I did not seek out even once, never, and they would just end up in my path. I would end up in theirs. We would work
Ah,
together. They would both heal me, through their services, and then also teach me,
yeah,
for the time that we were connected.
yeah.
And then I would leave those experiences with just, that many more sort of skills and abilities and understandings, and myself healed more as well. And
Wow.
life just has continued to do this to me throughout. So finally, at some point, my guides and allies who I was finally in deeper connection with were like, you know what, you're going to go do this for other people now. And I
Yeah.
was like, still not ready.
How did you
Still
know?
not.
How did you know you weren't ready?
Well, I felt not ready. They were very clear that I was
Ah,
ready,
okay.
right?
Yes,
But
yes.
this is sort of this thing where I think a lot of healers, a lot of spiritual teachers, and a lot of just people have this sort of oh, what do they call it? I can't remember the word. There's actually a term for it psychologically, but it's like the pretender syndrome or whatever. You feel like, oh, I'm not really this person. Why are people expecting me to be this person or to do this thing?
Yes.
Imposter syndrome, that's what
Ah,
it's
that's
called.
right. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did it with teaching too. I got my master's degree in teaching, not even in
Wow.
education, in teaching itself. And I
Wow.
went to go teach and I still was like, why are people letting me do this? So I did the same, like, I don't think this is right. This can't be right.
Wow.
And I did the same with spiritual healing, but my guidance was very clear. My guides and allies were very loud. And the messaging was very obvious that I was supposed to do it. And so I had learned by this point, this is 30 some years in my spiritual path. And I had
Wow.
learned very, very clearly and very many times that you don't ignore your guides and allies. Like, it doesn't go well for you if you ignore your guides and allies.
Yes. So true.
So I trusted them, and I just started, offering the services I knew that I technically understood how to do and what to do. And so that's how my healing services and my healing came about. And I just did. I just told people, okay, well, I'm going to offer this now. And if anybody would like that, and people just started showing up. And, it's interesting. I've noticed as I've gone through this as well, that the people who come, I'll say, for example, the people who came at the very beginning, their issues and their needs were a little bit simpler, or kind of lighter, or a little, like, maybe easier might be the right word.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of like life just has this way of, like, offering you exactly what you need in order to sort of help you go the direction that you're going, right? And
Yes.
so as things progress and I really gained trust in this, like, oh, I really am doing this and I really can do it, and guides were right, it was time to start offering it.
Yeah.
um then people came with maybe more severe or more complicated, or a little bit darker sort of issues, and that's just sort of been how it goes. And I love that. Why
Mm.
wouldn't it be that way, right? That
Mm.
exactly what I'm able to offer is what I'm going to offer, and exactly who needs exactly what I can offer is who's going to show up and ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just keeps being that way. And so I've gained sort of that experience, and then the trust in my own
That's
abilities.
what I was going
And
to say. It felt like the
yeah,
more you trusted yourself, the more just it sort of got more compacted and bigger, and the experiences were greater, for those that coming
exactly.
into your service. That's how I see it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
Wow.
and another piece of this progress over the whole, my whole life that has gotten me to this point has been that healing of the childhood trauma that I did experience. So that's sort of the other side of things. And I don't think the two could have been any other way, right? My
Yeah.
spiritual experiences, my spiritual development, my spiritual teachers who would show up, and the lessons I got from that, it was paralleling the healing that I was doing for myself, and the
Yes.
ultimate purification of my mind, my body, my heart, and all of that had to happen as well.
Yes.
So again, those things I also didn't go seeking, didn't want. necessarily, and just kind of were presented to me and put in the path for me. And then I was able to, okay, yeah, I guess I should do this healing. I guess I should do this work on myself. You know, it's time. And those things were perfect. They're everything perfectly timed as always.
Would you say there was like a point in your life where, especially with your childhood trauma, where you were sort of getting woken up, getting like, what was the one pivotal moment where you, because this is something that I get asked so often in the work that I do. Michelle, how do I know when to start? And I say to him, well, you're here right now. This is your
Yeah.
starting point. Or you might have seen a message or something. So what was your starting point? Because you are so knowledgeable. Oh my gosh. I mean, just with what you're sharing, I feel like I have like my jaw dropping. And but what got you to the point of even the realization of your childhood trauma? And then, I've got to start working on myself. Was there one specific moment or just many?
Oh, there was many moments. Yeah. I guess part of I guess I'll say, you know, I was maybe, and I had already been through a lot of spiritual awakening and experiences, and I had already been through some levels of healing my childhood trauma too. It wasn't like I didn't know it was there. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'd been through counseling and some things, but I was maybe, oh gosh, 29 or 28 or something. And I just had left like yet another failed relationship,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I just kind of stopped and I said, why do I keep doing this? Like, why do I only find, even when I think I've found a relationship and a partner who is actually really good this time, or really is like loving, or really does understand like the deeper aspects of life and has some, you know, wider sort of vision and philosophy or depth to them. And then they still end up being abusive or, you know,
Yes.
neglectful or both or worse. How does this keep happening? You know, it can't be that there's only that type of person out there. So
Yes.
clearly it's something I'm doing, right? And this sort of you know, struck me, and I asked people like, well, what do you do? What do you do when you seemingly can't stop finding the negative and creating the negative for
Ah,
yourself? And you know, and people were like, well, maybe you go to therapy. And I was like, oh, I've done counseling for decades, you know, because
yes.
of childhood trauma. I've
Yes.
done counseling. And they were like, oh no, therapy is different than counseling. And I was like, oh,
Ah,
well, what's therapy?
wow.
You know, and how do you get it? And then I looked and it was like so expensive and it seemed so prohibitive. There's no way I could have done it. I was just
Yes.
struggling to even get through school and, you know, pay rent and bills. And I just lost someone who was paying half my bills and, you know, my
Yes.
partner. So I didn't know how I was going to do that. And yet another person, you know, kind of randomly said, oh, well, there's this Catholic Community Services, and they help you get therapy, actual therapy, Jungian psychotherapy, for cheap and or free. And I was like, oh, well, I'll try that then. I put in like a little ticket, like a request, you know, my name and my number, and here's what I need. I feel like I need that I don't have access to. And then I totally forgot. I didn't hear anything back. I forgot I had even done that. It was maybe 6, 8 months down the line. Someone called me and they said, hey, are you looking for psychotherapy? And I was like, oh, yeah, I actually was like 8 months ago. And they're like, oh, yeah, well, we finally have a slot open for you. And we have a therapist who wants to see you. And, you know, it's going to be $20 a session. I was like, oh, I can do $20 a session. That's really
Yes.
easy. And
Yes.
this is very exciting. And I had totally forgotten. And so I started going to this therapist. Thank God. She was one of the coolest people I've ever met in my life.
Ah,
There's a lot of therapists who are probably not that, I don't know, aligned with what I needed, or,
yes.
you know, do you know what I mean? Like, they're
Yes.
just like we were talking about, there's kind of healers out there who are maybe like kind of frauds or just not maybe what you need and whatever.
Yes.
Same with therapists.
Yes.
There's all kinds of people out there. And I've talked to people who've had seemingly horrible therapists and seemingly horrible time in therapy. And oh my God, it was the opposite for me. This was like the perfect person for me. She's the most knowledgeable person and I've ever met in the realms of psychology and psychotherapy. She was so good at what she does and just really understood who
Yes.
I was and what I needed. And
Wow.
it was perfect. It was a perfect match. And so over the course of a year, I really started to dive deeper into healing myself, which again, I had been going to counseling for years because of childhood trauma. And I thought that I understood and I thought that I knew what was happening with me and how to deal with things and
Yeah.
what I had to No, I didn't know anything. I had not even barely
Wow.
scratched the surface, which blew my mind because of all that training and all that counseling. And it was all really just kind of behavior modification and reframing, which are
Yeah.
fantastic tools. And they
Yeah.
helped me a lot, but they were
Yeah.
no longer cutting it because they can't actually go deep into your deepest trauma, your deepest psyche and heal that. They cannot do that.
Ah,
They can help you get around it, right? They're kind of like the
yes.
band-aid. Yeah. But they
Yes.
don't actually go into the wound and like pull out the, shrapnel that was in there all along, causing the
Amazing
inflammation to keep
energy.
going, right?
Yes. Awesome.
So she helped me find that. And one of the things I always like to share that just blew my mind is there was this one specific session we had, and she said, okay, when you're, because I was going to start to date again, right? This was my
Yeah.
whole goal, right? Was to like be able to date and not have horrible people that
Yes.
I'm dating.
Yes.
And so I was going to start dating again. And she was very clear. She's like, I don't think you're quite ready, but if you're going to do it, then do it. And we'll see how that goes. And I'm like,
Yes.
okay, I think I'm ready, right? Like, I'm sure I'm ready.
Yeah.
It's what I want, so I'm gonna do it. So I'm starting to date people, and she would ask me, well, how do you feel when you're around this person? And I would say, oh, well, they're really cool. Like they're an artist and they have this job and they own a condo. And she was like, yeah, but I asked you how you feel around them.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, well, I'm excited because they're have all these like things that check these like list, check boxes off my list of what I want in someone.
Yes.
She's like, that's not how you feel around them. How do you feel around them? And I was like, so confused. I was like, I just told you. And she's like,
Yes.
that's not a feeling. None of those things are feelings. How do you feel when you're around them? And I was like, oh, I guess I don't know. And she was like, that's why you're not ready to date people yet. You
Ah,
don't even know how you feel when you're
yes.
around them. She's like,
Yes.
you probably won't even let yourself check in with how you feel because that's been a terrifying experience for you through your whole entire life, is feeling what other people feel or how you feel around other people. And there's very few people you've probably ever been around that you actually feel safe. And so
Mhm.
you probably don't want to feel what you're feeling around people. And I was just like blown away. I was blown away that I couldn't know how I felt.
Wow.
Me
That's a
after all
big
this
moment.
counseling.
That's a
Yeah, it was a
big
big, big
moment.
moment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I tell people, there's probably a lot of us who are empaths, who are healers, who have been through trauma,
Mhm.
who no longer are in touch with how we feel because
Mhm.
it was very dangerous for us to be. It was very difficult for us. It was overwhelming for us
For
in
sure.
various times, right?
For
Because
sure.
of trauma we experienced. And so we shut that whole thing down. And we instead got very intellectual about it, like I did. Oh, it's this, this, and this. I can describe everything about it. I can analyze everything about it. I can calculate how likely that is to produce a certain outcome, but I can't tell you how it makes me feel.
Yes. So true. It's like
So
out there. Let's rather put it out there, because to go back in here, it's like, no, no,
too
no, no.
much.
It's just too much.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Beautiful. What a way to put it.
Mm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So she really helped me really get back in touch with just feeling and just knowing how I felt, and
And was
then
that
learning
scary
how to
for you?
trust.
Was
It was
that scary?
terrifying,
Yeah. And
but
was
I
there a lot
didn't
of
know it.
vulnerability?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
See,
Yes.
and she and I trusted her so much,
Yeah.
just unconditionally. I was like, you, because she gets it. Like she
Yes.
understands me and the world, and I trust that about her. So it was a place where I could really do that and dive deep and get in touch with those feelings. So that
Mm.
started a whole series of healing, and things emotions that I could finally feel and get in touch with and let out. It helped
Mhm.
me finally start to see, like, how do I feel around certain people? It started to help me differentiate between, actually feeling safe or just feeling like, oh, if I keep this much armor up, technically I'm safe. Like that's a very different feeling from
Mhm.
actually feeling safe, right?
Mhm. Yes.
So
Yes.
eventually I did find a partner through these skills who I actually did feel safe and loved around,
Oh,
which is a brand new experience for
it's
me. That
big.
was not something that I had before. That
Yeah.
ended up being a really great relationship, and it taught me so much. And we actually did part ways eventually, um, which led me to yet another relationship where I also felt safe and loved, but also wasn't sort of the one. And each time I got to really then learn, like, what is it then? If it's not just safety and not just feeling loved, like, what is it that you actually want in a partner, right? Like,
Yeah.
what is that feeling?
Yeah.
And what does that feel like? And most of us, we're very cut off from that
Yeah.
because we're cut off from our actual, true, most vulnerable self and how we feel around other people, right?
Mhm.
We're very, very cut off. Or we're very intellectual about it. Oh, I want this, 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 and this. I have a checklist of things I want in a partner, right? And
Yes.
that's what we're looking for. We're not actually looking for the feeling. But I got to, with, both of these other partners, see what it felt like to feel loved and to feel safe, but also not feel in love, right? It's
What
actually
did how
different.
okay, yes. Okay, so this is such a beautiful moment. How would you describe the difference in both them? Because often in my experience, it's that sense of aloneness, and I most certainly am still learning to enjoy being happy in my own space, like really just happy and carefree and loving and kind. And I've just had an experience this in the last few days where I dug deep into being the little girl Michelle again, and it was fascinating because I want to speak a little bit about CPTSD healing, okay, and
Yeah.
about the shadows, because my son was in the car and I was driving him to a basketball game with friends, and this is what I'm still working with regards to my PTSD.
Mhm.
And I'm realizing I'm starting to notice my patterns, and I've been deep diving. I feel like yawning, but like for 15 years, I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God, there's another level.
Yeah, there's more.
But there's more. Wait, I feel like a commercial, and there's more, Michelle, and or an infomercial. But anyway, he was making what they call like a somehow to do with a paper bomb, and I didn't know he was doing this because I heard them fiddling in the back, and he went, bah, and the thing sparked off. And I just went, what the hell, Kate? And I could feel my body just ripple. I was like, okay. And okay, Michelle, you got to shake this off, And then we got to the basketball game. And as we were walking, there was a kid on a little scooter behind me. And I heard him go like this, the sound again. And I still realized I was in a traumatic state because I just, and then I got annoyed because I was like, damn it. I'm still working through this, because clearly my limbic brain just went into fight, flight, or fright. And then I thought I was okay, but the next day I could feel I was very discombobulated, and I just, when you just can't get back into your space. Does it make sense? I just couldn't
Yep.
get back into my calmness, and I was like, whew, and I was exhausted the next morning, and I just started to realize how this threw my hormones off, and everything was just a trigger. I had amazing sessions, but the sessions were massive sessions. And then I just had a moment later on, this is like a day later, where my daughter said something. She's 18, bless her cotton socks, and she said something, and I just took it completely personally, and I was triggered. So the triggers just kept coming and coming and coming and coming. And I just realized that it was again that little girl inside of me that was just not feeling safe in this world. So have you felt like that a lot in your experience of healing, in your experience? Do you still have moments like that with
Oh yeah.
your childhood trauma coming up?
Oh yeah. And this is for me. So I went through that Jungian psychotherapy
Yeah,
years later after I had really integrated a lot of that. It took years, right, of
yes,
dating those other people and seeing the differences and feelings and safety and love and how that's not just even quite it. And so what is it? And all of this years later, I was then finally diagnosed with CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder.
yes.
Um, and then I went through EMDR therapy, which you
Okay,
kind of have to do Jungian psychotherapy first, and then you can do the EMDR
okay.
for various reasons. And if you do it in that order, then it can be like really transformative. And it was really transformative for me.
Wow.
And again, things I would have thought that I had sort of healed and were done with. Nope, they're still in there. And so we had to dive back in and heal those. And even then, even after that, although I had way less flashbacks and those moments where I'm triggered, and uncontrollable,
Yeah,
it's still there. And it's probably genuinely always going to be, right? Layers of it and pieces of it that have to heal, because our brains, when we were originally traumatized, shattered into like a bunch of different pieces, right? And all of those pieces are a different aspect of sensory data from the event itself. And there
hmm,
can be how many pieces of sensory data are you taking in at any
sure.
given moment?
Yes,
Thousands, right?
yes,
So
yes.
so all of that is in there, and any one of those can then be a trigger later, right? So even though I've gone back in in EMDR therapy. I do this because it's the light
That's
moves back
right.
and forth,
Yes.
your fingers move back and forth. There's usually a left-right activation with your visual cortex. And so that even though I've done that, there's still even triggers from some of those things. The difference now is, whereas before things would trigger me and I'd have no idea what even triggered me, and then I would just be in this like mess on the floor, like sobbing and rocking back and forth or whatever, right? State I would be in. Now that doesn't necessarily happen, but something will happen. And like you described, I'll get like tense, I'll get angry, I'll get reactive, I'll get like taking things personally, and okay. But now I have this like space where I can go, look, see what's happening? This is happening again. You're doing this thing. It's okay. You can't really stop it, right? But you can notice it, and you can then sort of, okay, well, I'm going to respond differently then. I'm going to do this other thing. And that is already bringing some of those little shattered pieces back into a streamlined narrative in your mind. This is the way the sort of materialist view of it is, right? We've shattered those experiences. They've gone into all the sensory data. Anything that triggers any one of those will put you back in that memory and that feeling. And so then you start acting in whatever way may make you feel safer. So when we're bringing those back in, we're incorporating them. They talk about bringing it back into this sort of narrative, streamlined fashion rather than this shattered pile of sensory data. And that's what's happening with PTSD. When we talk about the exact same thing, but from a spiritual point of view, we say your soul got fragmented and you left part of it somewhere. And we're going back to get it and retrieve it. And we're bringing it even in when I'm doing sound healing, for example, I'm even describing it as there's this data out here on the edges and we're bringing it back into the central flow. Right. And they're all describing the same thing. So I went through, this Jungian psychotherapy, and then I went through EMDR, CPTSD therapy, and I've had shamanic healing. And I can see how they're the exact same thing. They're just happening from different angles. And I've had people ask me when I present, and I'm talking at a conference or something, and they'll say, well, do you think it sounds like what you're doing when you're doing shamanic work is what I'm doing when I'm doing psychotherapy and when I'm doing EMDR therapy? And I'm like, yes, it is. There is no difference.
That's right. Just a different modality. That's all
different
it is.
Modality.
Also similar. People are just using different words or different, muscle testing or I love it. And it's somehow you got my thought in the field, because I was going to say, well, what's the difference with soul fragmentation, and you answered it. I was like, thank you. She got it.
Well, and I want to share this experience I just recently had because it was so powerful. And it's the first time I've ever done this before. So some of my triggers I do know, and a lot of them, as we just described, no one's ever going to know. We're not going to know. No one else is going to know. Like, what was it about that triggered you? I don't know. Which trauma was it from? Which sensory data? Who knows? Right. But something. But a lot of them I do know. Right. I know some of them, and some of them I've seen are almost gone completely. So for example, one of them was people knocking on the door. Someone knocked on the door. At one point I would just lose it. I would just start bawling and not know why. And I'm like, I consciously understand logically there's no reason that someone knocking on the door should bother me at all. Like, it's a very normal part of life. But no, I'm having this reaction I can't control. Now when someone knocks on the door, most of the time I don't even care. Sometimes they knock and I notice I get scared, and then I just go, oh, there's no reason to be scared. It's just someone at the door, and I can answer it or I cannot answer. I don't have to do anything, or someone else can answer it, and everything's fine. And I'm able to sort of like respond to that, a little bit better. But the other day, one of my things that is still a strong trigger for me is either my teeth or my nails being hurt. Right. And I understand exactly where it comes from. I know which trauma it was. I was tortured by a dentist when I was about between the ages of 4 and 7, I think it was. And so that's why my teeth have this specific trauma. And the nails thing actually comes from a previous life where I was a torturer and I ripped people's nails out.
Check, I just felt that. I was like, I think I've been there with you. Hey?
And the two are connected because I was torturer in that life and I was torturee in this life, and teeth and right. So there's a lot of connection there. I did also torture people with their teeth, so that was also connected. So I'm even feeling it talking about it. Like, it's really overwhelming for me. But I've been working with it and releasing it for many, many years, and bringing back those pieces of myself and streamlining them again many times in many ways. There just can be a lot of pieces sometimes. But anyways, the other day I was out with my chickens. I have chickens. It was really cold, and they have this brick that holds their food lid on their plastic tub, you know, where their food is. And I picked up the brick, and because it was so cold, it was covered in ice and frost, and it just slipped out of my hand, and it just kind of hurt my thumb, and I didn't really pay attention to it. And I, you know, fed them and everything. My thumb's just kind of hurting this whole time. I put the brick back on. I go inside. I go to wash my hands, and my nail is like ripped through my thumb bed. And even describing it, I'm like feeling just
no,
how
my teeth
like
are feeling it. Yeah, I just like, oh, let's just shake it off. Oh,
yes.
yes.
And nobody likes that. It's not a fun
No,
experience. It
yes,
hurts. All of us would go, oh God. But for me, it's like a trigger,
yeah,
and I know it.
yes,
And I looked at it, and in the moment I looked at it and realized that's what had happened, I felt the two sort of paths diverge. And I just sort of was able to step back and be that part of our consciousness that can observe everything from a detached place. There's a very fine line here where I could have just kept going that direction that I'd gone a million times before, into dissociation, and just be like that level of observance where it's you're not
yes,
even connected anymore.
yes,
Right? Or I could go the level where I'm staying connected and I'm staying with the energy of it, but I'm still just remaining in observation and just going,
wow,
yes,
that's
your thumb is
powerful.
ripped.
That's
Yeah.
powerful.
Very powerful. I'm like
Wow.
feeling the power of it now
Oh,
too. So
yes.
yeah, so I did that instead. I was like, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try staying in connection with the pain of it, with the memory of the torture,
Sure.
with the part of me that wants to not be connected with it, and just
Yes.
stay present with all of that. But from this place of neutrality where I realize I don't have to react in any certain way. I can just sit with it and just go, yeah, your nail is broken. It's ripped
Yes.
off, and
Yes.
you're okay, and everything's
Wow.
fine. And just feel that
Incredible.
energy, the massive amount of energy just going through you, and just release it. Just let it go. Just let
Yeah.
it be. And I
Yeah.
was just doing that. And I realized I was doing it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm doing it. I'm so excited. Like, this is amazing. And then it was fine. And it just
Wow.
passed. And my thumb, I just like took care of the nail, and I bandaged it, put salve on it, and it was fine.
Incredible.
I've
Wow.
never done anything like that in my life.
Sure.
So this is my sign to myself that like this is how much you've healed, and this is how much you're healing still, right? All that
Yes.
energy I felt coming through, all the pain and the terror and the fear and all of this stuff that I just let come through, and I just let it be what it was, and I just watched it and didn't run away from it.
Yes.
That's now all gone. It's healed.
Wow.
Right? The
Sure.
next time something happens to my nails or my teeth, it'll be that much easier to just go, yep, and that's okay. It's
That's it.
okay. You're
That's it.
fine.
Oh, and thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that, because it just shows you how I always describe trauma as so multi-leveled and multi-layered, and I got this visual recently of like it's kind of like Play-Doh, sometimes we get, like for me with Play-Doh, I always like wanted to do a big round ball, but then sometimes it's like that round ball is like, damn it, I can't get it round, or and then sometimes you've got the round ball and then there's like a fingerprint in it, and you think, oh, I've almost got it perfect. And it's exactly what you've just described in terms of
Yeah.
everything. It's almost like when we're working through something, at times, for me, it feels like we're schizo. It's like, because if you had to describe that as you've just described it again, you went out, you came in, it was like you observed, you were in it, you were in the pain, you were in the, and then that calming just happens, like, ooh, wow, incredible. So, man, that's awesome. The disassociation is a big one, I find, for a lot of myself and for people who have experienced severe trauma in our lives. And,
Yeah.
for me, trauma is not just only being sexually abused or having alcoholic parents or whatever. It's the feeling that is so real. It's a moment in time of being a baby and crying, and perhaps not having a mother come there within a split second of, okay, I'm here, and feeling nurtured. We would call it abandoned, we would call it rejected, but it's already affecting the brain in some specific way.
Yeah.
So what a beautiful story to share. So thank you. How's your finger doing, by the way?
It's completely healed. You can't even tell
Wow.
anything happened.
No, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
It was pretty
Wow.
amazing. Yeah. I
Incredible.
really I hope people have faith if they're out there and they're like, "Oh, I can't stop myself. I just find myself still in it. I thought I healed this." I mean, this has been I don't know how many years now. I'm 41 in about a week. My birthday will be, I'll
Wow.
be 41, and I've been dealing with healing trauma since I was a baby, I guess, right?
Yes.
Like that's when it
Yes.
started. Really in past lives even is when it comes, back from those lives as echoes as well. So it's a process, and I don't think that I'm done yet. Like I said, I think the next time some trigger happens, I'll be even better at, again, noticing
Yes.
it, staying present for it, having just the right level of, I don't want to call it dissociation, there's that experience, and they're just so similar, but that experience we have of our higher self, or our oversoul, you might call it, or the observer self, right? That is not dissociated. It
Mm-hmm.
just is neutral, right?
Mm-hmm.
It really is just the observer, but it doesn't run from anything. It doesn't reject anything, where
Mm-hmm.
dissociation is both stepping into that observer, but then also completely going a different direction and going, I'm not even going to stay connected with this. I'm not going to experience this. I refuse to accept it. And so I'm out, right? Something, I'm
Yes.
going somewhere else. And that's what we don't want. But they're very similar. To have this experience of stepping outside of yourself and really viewing yourself neutrally can feel and sound like dissociation,
Yes.
but it's not. It's very different, right? And that is the difference. One is running away and rejecting, and the other is in full acceptance and staying present.
Yes.
And that can be hard to sort of describe, but I hope people gain sort of faith in themselves, that they can stay more and more present and more connected, no matter what the pain feels like, no matter how overwhelming that energy is. Huge. It's massive. It's been waiting for how long to be released and to be felt, And so to know that you actually can stay with it, and you can stay even sort of neutral and loving with it, no matter how terrifying or dark it sort
Yes.
of seems. That is true, and that we always have support and help in that too, from our spiritual guides and allies, which that's actually why I was able to, I guess I left out a very important part of the story when I stepped back and saw, okay, your thumb is ripped and you're sitting here and you're about to go into traumatized rejection, dissociation. The being who is actually telling me that is one of my guides and allies. So even though I was like in my sort of observer self over soul state, I was only there because my guide was like, hey, pay attention. Look
Yes.
at this, right? Look at what
Yes.
you're doing. Stay in this moment. And thank God. Right. So we can
Awesome.
also always count on those beings and energies to help us more and more and more, the more that we develop that connection with them.
That is so true. And I have to share with you, it's so funny because I bent my middle fingernail back yesterday morning. so,
Mhm.
so, so I think, like, in your experience of your trauma with your thumb, I was like, yep, I can relate. But what's
Yes.
so fascinating, so similar, but I also was like, oh, okay, just clear the pain, just clear, and I was just breathing through it. And I knew the experience of how come, because I'd bent it and quite back, and I was like, whoa. And I cleared the pain and I just breathed through it. Normally, and I can honestly own this, sometimes I stay in victimhood, like, oh my God, my nails are
Why?
sore, why did
Yeah.
this happen to me? And this could be like 2 hours later. And fascinating enough, so this is for me how we create as we are working through the different levels and layers of manifestation, but also just stepping into that wiser part and our guides being there for us. And I was just having a day off yesterday and I was walking around in town and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go and have my nails done. Now, normally I don't like having my nails done
Mm.
because I don't like the filing that they do.
Yeah. Mhm.
I do. I kind of, in South African terms, we have a saying called we grill. It's like the body goes,
Yeah.
okay. and, but I happened to just walk into this one salon and I said to this young woman, I said, how do you file? And she said, I get it. She says, I also don't like a lot of filing and also cuticles being pushed back. I never associated to perhaps being a past life or anything,
Mm.
but she was so gentle and so allowing. And I thought, okay, I'm working through this. This
Mhm.
is good, because of my finger as well. I thought, I'm actually okay. I can do this. And it turned out to be a really great experience because I walked in, she had a client that had cancelled at the last minute, and she said,
Oh,
actually,
wow.
I can see you right now. So that's the level of manifestation when we're in these higher frequencies. Do you find that that's how your life is working since you've
All the time.
worked through so much? It's
Constantly.
beautiful,
Yeah.
hey?
Yeah. Even when I was not working through so much or not doing such a great job or really
Yes,
lost in the darkness, I look back and I go, that was all perfect. It was
yes,
perfect. It was
yes,
how it had to be. And just the right experience would happen at just the right time, good and bad, to bring me what awareness I needed,
yes,
self-awareness usually, right? But whatever learning I needed and whatever reflection I needed and whatever motivation I needed in order to go in certain directions, and I think that is manifestation, right? Is that
yes,
it's always perfect.
yes.
And speaking of that, this is why I like to sort of give it up to God, or people say like, I don't know what's best for me, so you let me know, God. And I think that's a really powerful thing to say, like,
Beautiful.
I'm manifesting this, I'm manifesting this, I'm manifesting this, or better, because I don't actually know what's best. I just know
Yes,
what I think that I want to manifest, right? And what
yes,
I feel sort of guided towards. But there may be something that even feels sort of negative, or that we would have never like really chosen for ourselves. And then we do it and we're like, oh, I really needed that actually, right? Like
yes.
this nail experience that you had, like, I don't really want to, but I'm going to try it. And then it turns out to be sort of perfect, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Did
in
you
my
give
life,
up
it
on the
might.
why? Did you ever give up on the why? Why did this happen to me? Did you ever ask
I
those questions, perhaps?
Oh, for sure. And I do I in hindsight, it is much easier to see why. In the moment, it's very hard sometimes.
For sure.
Why is this happening?
For
You're like,
sure.
oh, and then you look back later and you're like, oh, like it had to be that way, actually.
Yes.
Right? It
Yes.
was actually perfect.
Yes.
Um, yeah. And so
Awesome.
yeah, I think, trying to the how is another thing, right? That we have to let go of when we're manifesting and we're like,
Yeah.
I know I want to be here. I don't really see how I get from here to there. Oh, well, right, that I'm gonna keep going that direction and trust that it works out, and it does. Again,
That is
perfectly.
beautiful. The way you just said, oh, well, because I just saw this kind of like, that's how spirit work with us and our guides work with us. Oh, well. Because it's
Oh,
like,
well.
well, if you look at it, even the analogy of a well, a lot of times we can't see the bottom of the well.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah.
Hey, isn't that perfect?
Yes.
Because you sort of look and we might take a coin and throw the coin, and sometimes we might hear the coin make a little noise, we might not. But it's, oh well, that's how spirit for me work with us. We want the time, but we actually, they just work in the present. They don't
Mm.
speak about the past, the future, the what's coming up. It's like we're talking about the now. And how do your guides, or how did you meet them, first of all, with your experience of the work that you've done?
Yeah. Oh, it's a hard question because they're all sort of different.
Yeah,
And I know that most of them have been here my whole life. And when I was very young and I had imaginary friends, some
yeah.
of those are the guides I still have today, if not all of them. And and it's funny, it's cute, like the names I had for them now then to me were just sort of names. And now I see those names and I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. For example, I had a blonde haired very beautiful, like very pure thinking and like high energy woman. I called her Angie.
Oh,
And now
wow.
I work with her and she's very often like a physical medical sort of guide. Like she'll like tell me what to eat and
Wow.
not to eat and what to sort
Yes.
of take and not to take and whatever. And I'm like, oh, Angie, angel. She's
Oh,
an angel,
wow.
right? Like, and things like that. So it's kind
Of
of funny like
course.
how the synchronicity sort of like worked, or how you sort of as a child's mind, how you looked at something and like how I look at it now. Very
Yes.
different, but it's the same energy.
Yes.
So that's some of them. One of them I got in really deep connection with through channeling my first fictional novel.
Mm-hmm.
And this being was in the story, and I didn't know this being consciously or in 3D reality. But after writing about this, and I didn't really even know I was channeling the book at the time, I knew that it came to me in a flash, what people might call a download, and I knew that it was its own sort of thing that wanted to be birthed. I wasn't like making it up. I just like came to me fully formed and I was
Mm-hmm.
just bringing it through. But I just wasn't really ready to call that channeling, I guess. I still had a lot of resistance to some of the, what I felt like was new age or woo woo sort of stuff,
Yes.
because I come from
Yeah.
that very logical, very,
Yeah.
so I was kind of in rejection of that, but I kind of understood those things I just described. It was its own thing. It was sort of like already
Mhm.
there and I was just sort of helping it come into creation, but I just wasn't as in deep of connection of like what was actually happening until this being that showed up in the story. And I talk about it, like I would sit down to write this book and I had no idea how to, I was a very good writer, but I didn't know how to write a fictional novel like at all.
Yes.
But I would just sit down to write and it would just start coming into
Coming
my
through.
mind. I would just see it and I would just describe it. And I would just sort of say, like, I don't know what's going to happen next. And then it would just start happening. Okay, well, this is what's happening. And a character would show up and I'd be like, well, who's that? And I would just start
Wow.
describing them. And it all just came together that way. Well, one of them was like a spiritual being in the story. They're a spiritual entity and guide and ally, and describing them and going through it. And very clear, they had these sort of horns and this forest energy, and it was very masculine, and they were all about like creation and the cycles of time and how some things just need to like sort of die and then in order to be reborn and all of this sort of stuff. I could describe all of that. And then very soon after that, I probably on Facebook or, just somewhere where there's lots of content that's random and you just scrolling through, and I saw something that looked exactly like this entity that I had been describing in my story. And I was like, whoa, what is
Wow.
this? And I looked, and this is this entity called Cernunnos, or some people say Chernunos, or different ways of pronouncing him, but he's a sort of Celtic deity of the forest. He's masculine. He
Wow.
often has horns on his head. He's all
No
about cycles of
way.
time and renewal. Like all the things that I had written about him
Is
are
he
what
like
he
half
actually is.
half goat, half man?
He can sometimes be part animal
No
and part
way.
person, and that was also in the story. Is he's got a lot of animal energy, and so
Oh my goodness.
he also is associated. A lot of people might be more familiar with the Green Man, and that's a sort of corollary of his. It's sort of the same being, but in a
Okay.
different culture.
And
So
sorry,
he's
what are
also
they
that.
about? What do they represent?
The sort of cycles of time, how things just go through and they change. So they'll die and then they'll, turn into mush,
Oh
and then
my
they'll
goodness.
regrow again. So it's kind of like the growing cycle. And
I'm so
but you can apply
gobsmacked
it.
right now. You've
I
answered.
know,
Oh,
I was too.
sorry. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And can I tell you why? Like, you've.
Yeah.
This is just perfect because I have a friend, and we're going to go back to your book, but I got such goosebumps right now, okay? Because so I have a beautiful friend, Jill Cole, and she hypnotizes me. And this week, I think it was literally on Wednesday or Thursday, she hypnotized me, and this being came.
Oh,
I
wow.
kept saying he's got big horns and sort of hooves and half man, half body. And we sort of put it out there on her, we always put it out on her channel. And somebody came, but you've just answered exactly who he was because he appeared in the
Yeah.
channeling and the hypnosis. And I'm so excited. I can't wait to tell Jill that we discovered who this is. So thank
That's
you.
so awesome. Yeah. we
And
share a guide,
isn't
obviously.
that incredible?
It's incredible.
Wow. My heart is just completely expanded right now. I'm
I
like,
love that.
thank you.
I have him right here, actually.
Please show me.
This is one representation of him. And this is
Wow.
him in his fully sort of human. I mean,
Oh
you can see the
my
horns,
gosh.
but he's otherwise got a human face. Sometimes he seems to me like he has a wolf sort of face too.
Wow.
So he's a wild energy, and so he has a lot of animals that are associated with him, including snakes and elk and wolf and goat, and because he's all that wilderness natural energy is really his
Wow.
raw sort of powerful. I love him. We work together a lot.
Jeez, I swear I'm like, my cheeks are so sore, Lindsey, from grinning right now.
I love
So
it.
please thank him for coming through because we were like,
Yes.
who is this? And we were trying to look on our phones and we couldn't get the answer. I was even looking yesterday. So it's just come into my reality. So thank you.
I love him. I really look at him as like a guide through the releasing of what needs to go, right? What we need to
Sure.
drop and allow to die, so that we can
Incredible.
be even more truly what we actually are, be
Yes.
reborn, right?
Yes.
And so that's, at least when he came to me, I was going through a huge transformation and writing this story, and he's in the story.
Which
So
one is it? Is it the key of transformational healing?
no, this is Sine Curve of Aeons, Phytalis,
sorry.
which people can get in paperback. They can get it in
Okay.
Kindle or, electronic, and they can also get the audiobook now on Audible. It's professionally produced and it's fantastic. It's such a great
Wonderful.
story.
Awesome.
And it's about, these cycles of times that humans go through overall in civilization, giant, massive cycles of time, and what it has to do with our personal soul development as well. It's a really beautiful,
Wonderful.
beautiful story.
Oh my gosh.
so yeah, he popped up in the real world, and I was like, oh my God, that's him. And found out they're the exact same energies. This is him. And he came through. And that's when it really hit me, like, this book is something else. Like, I'm not just writing like a story. Like, this is actually something that really happened as far as I can tell. And these guides and beings are here to help bring it through. But also I, then felt, well, obviously this is a real being, right? If he's in my story and he came through that powerfully, that I was able to identify him that clearly, and here he is in these other traditions, and he's a real being. So I started kind of calling out to him and saying, like, well, what else? Like, do you want to talk? Do you want to hang out? Like, what's your thing?
I love that.
And
yeah,
he's
what's your thing?
Yeah.
Just tell me. Like, well, I'm just magical.
Let me know.
Yeah.
And then he just started, we work together a lot now. And so I have a very powerful and loving connection with him. So that's another one, different way that a guide came through. I also, one of them was told to me by an aura reader at one of those sort of, spiritual fairs. And that's we could do a whole show just on this one day I had at this spiritual fair. But she did my aura, and she was very angry. Like, she wasn't happy, and I could tell it had something to do with me, and I was very confused because I was just being a happy normal person, and I just let's take my aura.
You're too high vibe, yeah.
And when she was reading my aura after she got the picture and was sort of showing me, what, and I see auras and read them myself, so I just wanted to have this experience to see like what the difference was, and it is very different. It's very different what she does from what I see and do, and I just helped me understand auras and the way people see and perceive them, and what they can mean to people and everything a lot better. But the other thing is, she said, do you see this line coming down? There was this sort of pretty obvious line coming through from above, through my whole aura down to my heart. And I was like, yeah, I thought it was just the machine misprinted or something. She's like, no, that's the line of direct communication you have to your sort of main guide. And I was like, oh, and then I understood, this is what she's mad about. She's mad that I have this sort of skill and ability and this direct line of communication, and I'm not using it. And I was like, oh, I could see why that might make you angry with someone. Like, like, I've had to work for this and you haven't, you're not even using it or whatever. So I understood now. And then I was asking, well, who or what is it? And I thought at the moment, I thought in my mind, I did not say out loud, I said, oh, maybe it's my father, because he's passed when I was young. Yeah. And I've always felt him around, and I know that he's guiding me and helping me in various ways. And she just said out loud, oh, it's not your father. So she clearly had this skill and knew that. I was like, oh, okay. Well, so who is it then? And she was like, I can only tell you that he seems sort of Asian, and he's a man. I'm not sure who. And I don't know if she knew who or not. It wasn't supposed to tell me, or I was supposed to discover it on my own, but it sent me on this journey of like, okay, well, I want to find out who this is then. And eventually, through a long, long process of discovery, which really was meant to help me hone my skills of getting deep in, getting in connection, getting clear communication, understanding that is really true, and knowing when it is really the communication or when it's sort of my mind trying to make things up, and really like honing that. That's what that whole process was meant. That's why she didn't tell me or couldn't tell me who it was because I was supposed to go in and really find that out. And long story short, eventually I found out it was Lao Tzu, which I feel very humbled and grateful to be in connection with. Such a beautiful and bright energy as this. And so that's become one of my guides and allies too. So there's a lot of others we could go, but those are just some different ways that you can see how you might find like who is one of your guides or allies, or what, what they can be like. Yeah,
that's great, because I know that they shift and change all the time, and that I think that will be very helpful to anybody watching this, because sometimes they come through and they're there for a certain period of time, whatever that time may be, and then they move on, and
absolutely.
It's like with the Council of Eight. I've heard people say, well, I know of the Council of Eight. And I'm like, yep, they're not just here for me, they're here for whoever, and the Council of Eight might show up as another guide for you, but it's a collective. We're all connected. So tell us about how you work in terms of, do you do one-on-ones? Do you go, you come from obviously a teaching background, working with students. So what kind of work do you do that anybody who's watching this, that they can perhaps connect with you to guide them?
Yeah, thank you.
Help them to heal.
I really do see myself first as a teacher and then as a sort of spiritual guide and healer,
Hmm.
because my goal is for everyone to be independent, actually. And
Hmm.
I'm more than happy to help people and support them for as long as they want in whatever ways they want, and that's beautiful. And sometime down the road, uh, that person then should be able to just help themselves, right? And be in their
Sure.
own connection to their own understanding of what's good, true, and beautiful and heavenly and their guides and allies, and really trust that and move forward. So that's why I see myself really as a teacher first. Like I want everyone to get there, because we all have this,
I
you and I.
completely agree.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm
Right.
like, if I can do it, so can anybody else,
Yes.
So I completely agree. Yes.
Yes. And we also both understand that that doesn't mean that everyone's just going to jump right into it and
For
just like
sure.
everyone has different places, different speeds, different, and that's beautiful. So
Yes.
that's why I'm like, no rush, no pressure. And
Yes.
also you're going to get there eventually.
Yes.
So I love just putting that out there first. I do work with people one-on-one in all kinds of ways. I do just teaching. So if you just want to talk, share some of your experiences, just get feedback about that, sort of understand. And this can be for people in any place on their spiritual journey,
Wonderful.
like just starting and
Mm.
have no idea what to do or think about or words for anything, to people who've been on it for a long time, but just kind of need like some reflection, or like, I don't know, what do I do next? And where do I go next? And what does, all of that we can do. And I call that a coaching and talk session. So that can just be for anything you want to talk about or learn.
Okay.
And coaching and talk. Then
For
I do
sure.
guidance sessions, which is one-on-one, and it's more of a spiritual healing and energy healing, as well as messages that come through for your guides and allies. So
Mhm.
whether you know who your guides and allies are or not, we go into spiritual space together, which also gives you the ability to take how we do that and use it on your own if you want to. It's its own process. So you're learning even while you're doing this. And then you can get messages. Sometimes they're very specific and direct, and sometimes they're full of healing energy. I shouldn't even say sometimes, all of the time, they're both those things. But
Wonderful.
that
Yes.
healing energy that comes through can really go wherever your soul needs it to go. And so it's different for everyone. Sometimes
Yeah.
past lives come up, sometimes something like a soul retrieval can happen in the guidance session, messages come through, healing energy comes through, and so it's just very different for everyone. But those are the
Hmm.
types of things that you could expect from it. It's really
Hmm.
powerful no matter who you are and no matter what you're coming for. I do tarot readings with people one-on-one. I do past life tarot readings actually too. So
Wow. Oh, that's the
um
first time I've heard of that. Wow, that's incredible.
I don't know if anyone else in the world even does it. It's something I want to say about 4 or 5 months ago, maybe. My guides and allies
Oh,
were like, okay, now you're going to do past life tarot readings. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. And they're like, that's okay. You're just going to do it. And I'm like,
that's
okay.
incredible.
So I just started doing
Wow.
it, and they're amazing. They're really beautiful and amazing.
Really?
So,
Wow.
um, past lives started coming through in people's guidance sessions and healing ceremonies that I
Yeah.
do with people.
Yeah.
And so that kind of was already in place. And then using the tarot to access specifically a past life is a newer thing. So if you just
Wow.
want to know about a past life, and it's always going to be a past life that is directly affecting what you're going through right now,
Sure.
right? Whatever it is you're dealing with right now,
Yeah.
that's going to be what comes up. So
Yeah.
it is still very healing. all,
Wow.
all of the things I do are healing no matter what,
It
but they're
sounds
just in
like it.
slightly different ways.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I also do the sound healing, and I call it a tuning and alignment.
Yeah.
So I use sound tools, and all of these I do over Zoom. So it doesn't matter where in the world you are. You can just go to calendly.com/rogueways and just schedule a time that works for you. It already converts it to your time zone. So whatever times you're seeing are in your local time, and that's what's available. And if there's ever something that the time zone was so different or so weird and nothing was working, you can always contact me at lindsey@rogueways.org, and we can see if we can work something else out at a different time. But those are just the times that I tend to like to work. That's what's
Wonderful.
available on my calendar. So lots of stuff. And then people ask, wow, that's like so much to choose from. Which one should I do?
Yes.
And I
Yes.
just say, trust yourself. If one of them just stands out to you and you're really curious or really feeling like that might be interesting, then do that one. But if you're just really not sure, and you're not, and you're not in trust of that, and you're just like, I don't know, it's too overwhelming, you can also email me and I can check in with guidance and see what might be best for you.
Okay. Now, a question about the sound healing. if you have somebody that comes and says, I'm not feeling it, let's say
Mm.
they're starting their journey, and like for me, I know I can feel the vibration. I can feel exactly where it's, you know, where the energy is moving, and I love sound healing. Having said that though, years ago when I went to a crystal sound healing, I freaking couldn't stand it. Every part of me, because I was so in my head, I was lying on my yoga mat and we were in this big group, and everybody got up and was like, oh my God, this was amazing. I felt like ice cream. And I was like, what? Like, I just wanted to get up and leave. It was so hard to. So again, it's just an example of how we shift. You know, I was so in my head. I just wanted, I kept thinking, why am I here?
Yeah.
But for those of you who are like me in the beginning, how do you work with people if they say, well, I'm not feeling it? I'm not feeling it, Lindsey.
I have never had anyone not feel it.
Oh, awesome.
I've
Okay.
never had that. So that would be really confusing for me. And what's really interesting is because I do it distance, you're 90% of the time not even going to hear anything. So you really
your
are
energy is
just
just picking
laying
up
there.
on it.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good to hear.
Yeah. And I don't know. Yeah. Cause no one's ever reported that. I've always
Okay.
just had people react to it in really, really profound ways as well.
Beautiful.
This is the other thing that I might be different with me from a lot of other people is, you know, people will say like, well, what happens in the healing ceremony? Am I going to have like a soul retrieval? Am I going to have a demonic entity detached or something? And I just go, I don't know, because we haven't done it
Yeah.
yet.
Yes.
And everybody is so different. And I don't pretend like I'm not saying other people are pretending. I'm saying I don't know, so I don't pretend to know. And
Yeah.
I just trust that whatever is going to happen is the best thing that could possibly happen for you. It's what
Yes.
your soul needs right now. It's why you came to me. And that's
Yeah.
what we're doing. And so I would, if I could, I'd say soul retrieval, this much, you know, book it. But I don't know that that's what's going to happen. And I don't think it's good. Like we were talking about earlier, I know what I'm manifesting in my life. And I trust that if there's something better, or if that's not actually good for me to manifest, that my soul and my guides, my allies, heaven, source will go, that's not actually what you're doing. You're going this way instead. And I'm okay, cool. I trust
I
you.
love that. Yes,
Right.
because you're working in the present moment. You know, when
Mm-hmm.
clients will say to me, what can I expect? And I said, I don't know.
Don't
You
know.
know, like
Yeah.
my guides might say, well, this is going to come through, or, you know, a loved one's going to come through. But I just say, okay, loved one, thank you, Spirit. We're here
Yeah.
right now. They're only coming in next week, or they're coming in tomorrow. But I love that because you're working in the present moment by the sounds of things, and you're not
Mm-hmm.
putting any of your
Yes.
perceivedness of what it could be. I don't know if that
Yeah.
even makes sense the way I've said
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're not forcing it and you're not creating it, right? It's not
Yes.
contrived at all. You're just
Yes.
allowing.
I
And
love
actually,
that.
that is the most powerful place we can be, is in that place of actual neutrality, where we're just opening the channel and letting whatever needs to come through come through. And
Yeah.
that's exactly why I don't pretend to know what's going to happen, right? And I
Awesome.
know I can tell people what the types of things that many people tend to experience. And I
Yes.
can tell some stories about the amazing transformations that people have gone through, but I
Yeah.
can't tell you what you're going to experience or what we are going to do together until we just
Yes.
go in and do it.
That's it.
So yeah, and there is that level of trust then, and some people that's not going to work for them, and that's
Yeah.
cool. There's
Yeah.
some other healer somewhere that does exactly what they need, and they're going to find that healer instead. So
Would
I
you
just
say that that's the alignment of the frequency and where you're in? Like you aligned with that beautiful Jungian therapist, you know, 8 months later. But again, that's sort of for me, that would be manifestation. You put it out there into the field, and then you carried on with your life, you know, and 6 to 8
absolutely.
months later you got the call. And that's often when I'll say, well, if I'm not the right person for you, right person, inverted commas, and then if I
Yeah,
can't help, then let's find somebody or let's put it out there into a vortex or a portal or whatever, and say, let's bring the right person into your space. Because I
absolutely.
might have a tone or a tune of my voice that doesn't resonate with the person at
Mm-hmm.
that right time. And for me, it's about how can we be of service, you know, and that's what I love is you are correct in saying there are a few frauds out there. And it is sad. That's just perhaps the world in which we live in. Yet when we are of service from the heart space, I just feel that there's such a difference. There's such a different vibration, you know,
Absolutely.
and I don't even know what I'm trying to say. It's just in the feeling of like that kind of feeling, you know.
Yeah.
And it really is how we, in my opinion, show up for each other as the different therapists, healers, that we, you know, we all have different modalities. And
Yes.
I genuinely want to help people, you know, and if I can't help, I would rather pass them on to somebody and say, well, feel into this person, feel into, you know, it might be something in their picture, in their eyes, or their smile, or their voice. And it's like, well, then you're on the right road. You know, I'm not going to hold on to you and say, well, let's try another one, and let's try another one.
Yeah.
And
No.
6 months
Yeah.
later, well, come on, let's keep trying, you know. And because there are people, unfortunately, that are desperate, and I've been one of those too, where I just wanted a quick fix. I wanted to heal, and I did. I've chosen some very strong spiritual teachers in my life that, whoa, they've yeah, they've given it to me in many, many different ways, and I'm very
Yeah.
grateful.
Uh-huh.
I might not have been understood it at the time, but it was the vibration of what I chose. Would you say that resonates, Lindsey, with what comes
Absolutely.
into your space? Yeah.
Yep. And I think, manifestation, like you're talking about, is happening all the time. So we can
Mm.
talk about the manifestation we're doing consciously, where I'm choosing these things and this is what I'm manifesting and here's how I'm doing it. But whether or not we're doing that, we're manifesting everything all of the time. And it is
Yeah.
literally your vibration that is calling things towards you all of the time.
Yeah.
100% of your environment, 100% of your experience, 100% of the people you interact with, all of those were manifested and called to you by your vibration. You
Yeah.
couldn't change that if you tried,
Yeah.
right? And this is part of what, when way back to that healing of that trauma, this is part of what I finally understood. Like, that's why I only ever had those types of boyfriends and partners, was because they were exactly responding to my vibe. I couldn't have changed it if I tried
Yes.
until I
Yes.
changed my vibe, which isn't
Yes.
that easy to do, right? You have to actually go in and find out what is causing this and what is muddying things
Yeah.
up, and heal this and be in that space. And like we talked about, observe all that emotion, letting it just be, not
Yeah.
attaching to it, not rejecting it, just letting it. All of those things have to happen for your vibration to change, right? For your channel to open, for your heart
For
to be able to
sure.
finally go, here I am. I'm bright and sunny and loving, and like, I want that also. I'm creating that now. And then all of a sudden this person is there, and people will say, how do I know that I'm with the right person? How do I attract the right person? Well, unfortunately or fortunately, you're going to just attract the person you attract, and you don't get to consciously really change that unless you consciously really change that.
For sure.
Right?
Yes. I
Yeah,
love
we're
that. I love
we're
that.
always manifesting all
Yeah.
the time.
Now, please tell us about Rogue Ways. I had the privilege of probably chatting too much on your show.
Oh, it was awesome. You're one of my favorite guests. It was so cool to be able
Really?
to, yeah, because you're actually understand, and I feel like we both
Thank
see things
you.
in very similar ways in that, from that healing perspective, and what it
Yes.
is we're actually doing and what the best thing is for our people
Yes.
that we get to work with. And I love that. So I'm glad that you were able to come be on that show. Rogue Ways is a couple things. I do interview people one-on-one, and then I also do sort of a recap of like the events of the week and sort of news and politics and social,
Do you get
milieu and whatnot.
guided? Do you get guided with that? Or is it
Absolutely.
just, okay? Because I saw
Yeah.
it briefly about the shooting that happened this week, and I just want to send love to Colorado Springs,
Oh
and
yeah.
just, I saw
Yeah.
it, yeah, just
Whew.
wasn't ideal. That was big.
Lots of darkness in that
Yeah.
situation for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a collective thing we're all going through, right? So
Massive.
a lot is coming to the surface right now for
Oof.
all of us to heal, and we really do have to do that on an individual level in order for the collective to manifest that as well, right? Like, that is what we're
Wonderfully
all
put.
doing here.
Yes. Yes.
um so I'm glad that we can be aware of that. So that's what I like to do. I like to bring attention to what's happening, what the different sort of agents are
Hmm.
in orchestrating various things going on the planet, and then also how we're actually winning. Always, we're
Hmm.
winning, and so
Hmm.
I call it the winning report. I every Tuesday I do that. That's on Rogue Ways as well. So I'm either doing one-on-one interviews like we did together, or I'm doing that winning report where we're going through kind of what's happening in the world. And then on Thursdays, I do a show just for supporters called Middle Path, and it's much more of the spiritual emphasis. And I like to get into various traditions, various teachings, various lessons, various experiences I've had and what I've learned from them, and also I really love to bring in the practical, like what's a practice we can actually do? What's the way that we can actually, right, bring peace to ourselves, increase our love, presence, or heal, right, and release some old dark things. So every episode I try to do at least one practice that we can do together as well on Middle Path. And so that's for supporters only, either on Rockfin or on the audio Apple podcast. You can also get that. So those are the shows. That's the shows I do. And then I also do a show called Day Zero, which is very raw and, if people don't like swearing, or they probably wouldn't like Day Zero. I do that on Sundays with a couple guys, and we all come from pretty different perspectives. But then we are also looking at sort of what's going on in the world. And it's just a little bit more raw. And so that's another show I do. And I invite people to come find all of those. I'm on every podcast app or on Rockfin. I'm about to get kicked off YouTube, it seems.
Really?
Finally.
How
come? They don't like me. I talk about a lot of things that we're not supposed to talk about, I guess, when I'm talking about what's going on in the world.
Incredible. So where will they find you? Are you going into Rumble? I think Rumble's the next one.
I'm on Rumble. I mostly focus on Rockfin. It's rokfin.com/rogueways. And there's a lot of other people there too, but I'm also on Rumble. I'm also on BitChute. I'm also on, God, I don't even know all of them. So if there's a video platform out there, I'm probably on it, but YouTube won't be. I delete a lot of things from YouTube to avoid strikes as soon as I'm done with the show, and they still get me sometimes. And right now I've just been gotten twice in one day, yesterday, for old content, which is usually what they do when they're about to delete a channel. So it might not be there for much longer, but we'll see. Who knows?
That's okay. Opens up a newness. We'll find you elsewhere. That's the control that we all want to change.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the control.
Yes. So that, and a lot of people have said, why did you even stay on YouTube? They're full of censorship and And I'm like, I'm going to stay wherever I can for as long as I can, because there's people there still, and they may need to hear what I have to say, or who knows. Absolutely. So I'm not going to preemptively leave there, but yeah, we'll see. I've managed to stay for a lot longer than I thought was even possible, so thank God. Who knows what's going on.
Lindsey, where can people find you? Please remind us.
Rogueways.org is my site. It's the best place, as all the things we just talked about, my Telegram chat, if people want to join that, and all the things that I do, the spiritual services you can connect with there, the classes that I teach that are online that you can go through self-paced are there, the orgone that I create and sell is there, the crystal jewelry I sell is there, my books are there if you want to buy them directly from me. As well as my event coming up. It's One Day of Brightness, I call it. We do it every solstice and equinox. We do it in connection with the solstice and equinox energies. And this December, I think it was 18th. It's either the 18th or 19th. It's a Sunday. It's on Zoom, it's virtual, and we're having Joshua Lewis there. He's a physical medium, a clairvoyant, clairaudient, and he's going to teach us some mediumship skills, so people get to experience that and develop that in themselves. And then we also have Marty Leeds going to be there, and he's a math magician, a Gnostic teacher, and just an amazing being. So he's going to present some new content and teachings there. And then I always do a morning session of healing and deep connection as well. So it's a full day, and it's a really beautiful day, and it's a really good way to bring brightness to this dark time in the winter.
Online?
It's online. It's on Zoom.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can buy tickets to that on my site as well in the shop if people are interested in coming. And if you can't make it to the whole day, or the time is just wrong for you, it's in the middle of the night, wherever you're at, we record it, so you can always come back and see it. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, that's awesome. Thank you so much. I could speak to you. I mean, guys, this is like,
I'm sure forever.
This is all her stuff. And I'm like sort of checking. I'm like, oh my God, there's more. There's more.
There's more. There's a lot.
You are a wealth of information, and I'm definitely going to have you back probably next year sometime if that resonates with you. And thank you so much for your time. Really, you're just an absolutely beautiful person, and I've loved having you here on Keeping It Real. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. My pleasure. And go and sign up. Go and check out Lindsey. As you can hear, she just is amazing. I mean, seriously, I feel so blessed how we've sort of come into each other's spaces and aligned, and I feel like we could just giggle the whole day.
Yeah.
You know, kind
That's
of like
true.
get off on, even after you and I spoke and I was on your show, I was like, oh my God, my cheeks are just so
I know.
sore. Guys, see you soon. And thanks for joining us. And remember, love is why we are here. Love you all. Bye.